Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our June Family Law Academy. My name is Allison Frazier, and today we will be talking with Sodoma Law attorney Theresa Viera and Gigi Hamilton of Relationship Redesign about prenups, postnups, and beyond. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
To give you a little background about us before we get started, Sodoma Law is a family-focused and family-driven law firm with practice areas in family law, business litigation, employment law, and estates, wills, and trusts, serving both North Carolina and South Carolina. Theresa is a family law attorney at our Dilworth office and has a penchant for helping families plan a foundation for their best future, both before and after marriage. Joining us today, we are also very excited to have Gigi Hamilton. She is a licensed professional counselor, supervisor, author, and consultant, and has spent over 20 years of her career working to help couples and families' children, military service members, business leaders, and other psychotherapists learn and grow professionally. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box on the right of your screen. We will also have time for questions at the end. We love social media interaction. Feel free to interact with us live at Sodoma Law on Twitter or on Instagram stories at the Sodoma Way. If your question isn't answered today, feel free to follow up with us after the webinar. We love to hear from people in the community. Without further ado, what do you say, Theresa and Gigi? Let's get started.
Sounds good.
Hello.
Thank you, Gigi, so much for being here.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have this discussion with you.
Likewise.
Well, to begin with your number of years of helping relationships and marriages and individuals and families, what would you say are the things to think about when dealing in a healthy relationship?
Well, I guess first I'd like to say there's just nothing like being in love. Everyone wants to be in love. You know, that's our hearts pound. You know, we skip a beat. We just can't wait to be in that type of relationship. And what happens is you get so enamored in being in that space, you forget to think about planning. So once you're in love and you're ready to move forward and get serious, what happens is it's like getting in a car without a GPS, no destination. So what's important to have a healthy relationship is to have a plan. And some of the things that you need to plan for are things like having a role definition. You know, in today's time, sometimes women make more money than men. So what does that look like? Is the man still the breadwinner in the home as it relates to the finances? You have to talk about that. And oftentimes couples don't talk about that and they end up in situations because of that. Another thing you have to think about is values clarification. You know, often you get into a relationship, you can have different religious backgrounds, different political beliefs. Sometimes you're not talking about that because you're so in the infatuation stage. So it's really important that you spend some time as you're getting serious talking about these things, preferably with a professional, so that you can actually really come to a common ground and really move forward so that you're healthy in your relationship.
Yeah, I would have to admit there are some preconceptions out there that, you know, once you're in love, that's all you need, and you can just make anything work. Well, I do believe you can make anything work. However, it takes some work, and if you don't have those clear lines of communication and planning, as you pointed out earlier, then things can get convoluted. I would actually just add to that, you know, a lot of the preconceptions that you see about relationships in the past are not the same today. In my experience, for example, especially millennials, they're getting married later in life. So you have individuals entering into relationships when they've already established their careers. They already have a retirement account. They already own real property. These are all things you see in today's relationships that you didn't see 10, 20, 50 years ago.
That's true.
And that's one thing to consider. So, you know, if you don't talk about finances at the get-go, and maybe not the first or second date, of course, but at the beginning of the relationship, then you may have issues later on.
Well, and what's interesting though, as I talk about jumping in the car and not having a GPS, let me kind of also derail from that a little bit, because there is a portion of planning that occurs that is extremely extravagant, and that's planning for the wedding. Very often, you know, you get a wedding planner, you have to, you know, get the venue, you do create a budget financially for what that looks like. You actually define expectations on who's going to pay for what and what that looks like. There is such elaborate planning that goes into the wedding, but no one plans for the marriage.
Wow, that's amazing to think about. And people spend thousands upon thousands nowadays on weddings.
Yes.
I mean, we even know like the colors and the tuxedos and the dress. Like so much planning goes into the wedding, and that's unfortunate that people don't take the same time to actually invest in what is the marriage going to look like, what is the relationship going to look like. And that would actually bring me into a discussion about premarital agreements or prenups. Prenups are a great way to help a couple define what the roles will be in a relationship, and mainly to protect any financial matters, because a premarital agreement or prenup, as people call it, is what I would say an insurance tool. Yes. It is an insurance that just in case something happens to the relationship, that the couple has a plan in place should a separation occur. I always like to remind individuals, because I know, especially if you talk to my mom, for example, prenups have this stigma that it is negative, that it is presuming that the marriage will fail, etc. But I like to remind individuals I talk to, I'm like, well, when you got health insurance, did you automatically assume that you were going to have to be in the hospital in the next year or 2 years? Or if you got car insurance, are you going to suddenly start driving recklessly and try to hit every mailbox down the lane?
That's right, yeah.
I would hope not. I would hope instead that you are hoping for the best future possible, and you're just planning for the unknown if it may occur.
Right.
And then on top of that, I will say planning for the unknown when you're in a loving state versus we just separated, we're planning for divorce state.
Yes.
I'll just say from my experience is a much better situation.
And I absolutely agree. I'd like to piggyback on that. I think I'm the most happiest as a therapist when I have couples coming for premarital counseling. And you're right, they're in love. And they're also the most open to looking at the tough issues. You know, there's no conflict at that time. So they have a level head enough where they can actually come up with some logical answers to issues and have a plan ahead of time. And the prenup is a part of that process. So I really like that, that they should be thinking about that at the same time.
And why do you think that individuals don't take more time in planning before they even get married?
You know, that's a really good question. I really would love if it was mandatory, you know, to actually have this premarital counseling happen, you know, prior as a part of your prerequisite to get your license for marriage, because it's just not something people think about. I think a lot of it is it's because of that infatuation stage. There's not much planning going on because you're so busy being in love.
Yeah, they're clouded with the love factor.
Yeah, right. So, I really would like to do some research to really figure out, for those who have the insight enough to come in for premarital counseling, what those triggers were that made them. A lot of times, though, it's bad relationships before, or it's their second marriage. So they want to make sure that they're getting it right.
Yeah.
You know, but you don't want to have bad experiences in order to get your marriage right, especially, you know, for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's my goal to get married one time.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And have a plan. Yeah. Your insurance policy.
Exactly. Have a good insurance policy. So when talking about planning for a healthy relationship, I'm sure you also see the vice versa. A lot of the effects of bad relationships. What are some of those effects? What are the red flags, I guess we call them?
A lot of what I see is, I'm so visual in what I see, so I look at things and systems and things like that, but a marriage is a business, it's a partnership, and a lot of times the foundation wasn't stable to begin with. You know, they went into the relationship not knowing how to deal with conflict, so every time a conflict would occur, just look at it as another bruise or scar that happened, and over a period of time, it causes the demise of the relationship because you have so many unresolved issues. Some other issues that happen is there's a compilation of unresolved, unexpected, unspoken conflict or expectations. Oftentimes people have expectations of each other, but they assume that because my partner knows who I am, that you're just going to meet that need. And the needs aren't met, and so resentment actually develops. So there are a lot of different issues. And communication, we cannot talk about this without addressing communication issues. If you're not knowing how to correctly communicate with your partner, then it just chips away at your relationship little by little. I mean, eventually you have this big blowout. And the last thing is, and I'm sure everyone's heard of the 5 love languages. The 5 love languages, if you don't know how to love your partner based on the way they need to receive love, then you're going to struggle in actually connecting with each other.
That actually reminds me of the song R-E-S-P-C-T.
That's right.
It's all about learning what the other person needs to feel loved.
Yes.
And I could not agree with you more. And one thing I see when I have my clients come into my office is they talk about how they feel disrespected. And it's always, my question is, you know, how were you trying to convey how you were felt the need to be respected, or had the other person understand you? Because I almost feel like parties don't communicate. And then when they get to me, they want me to communicate it. And I'm like, well, I never lived with either of you. So I don't know how either of you wants to be respected. And so it's one thing to learn how to respect each other, and then also to expect other people to enforce that. Right. I will say a therapist as well as an attorney cannot fix your issues for you, but you have to be open and honest about how you want to be respected.
And studies have shown that women need love and men need respect. And it's how you convey those things within a relationship that either will actually allow your relationship to grow or allow it to actually, you know, fizzle out.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think that individuals are nervous to get to that deeper level of communicating what they need?
Actually, I don't think sometimes they even know what they need.
Oh.
A lot of times, you know, when you come into therapy, you know, it's funny, they come in with a presenting problem. You know, we just had this big fallout and she broke the juice, you know, the juice jar, and she wouldn't clean it up. And so you're talking about that argument, but it's so much bigger than that argument. Yeah. You know, they're not looking at the core issues as to why they need to be loved a certain way, what their expectations are. And until you can actually understand those things, you're going to have a hard time connecting with each other.
When do you normally see people identifying what they need? I presume it's not at the beginning. Maybe it's well into the relationship, or...
Well, I wouldn't know that until once they come into therapy.
Yeah, therapy. You're gonna
right. Those issues. Right. You know what I do think? What I think is that they try to tell each other what they need, but sometimes their communication is so off, they're missing the mark. You know what I mean? So that's what happens. That's what brings them through the door sometimes for therapy. Again, you know, but when they're coming for premarital, they're getting the insight ahead of time on how to do that communication and how to have those type of conversations. So when they get in that situation, they're able to say, okay, let's stop this argument. Let's figure out what we need. You know, and once you can do that, it's like, oh, that was so much easier to deal with.
So they're not spending 2 hours arguing about the spilled orange.
Exactly, right. So,
that sounds efficient to me.
Makes more sense.
Yeah. So I will note, you know, a lot of individuals don't actually do the premarital counseling. Instead, they come to you when they're actually in the marriage. Is that usually correct?
Well, no, I actually see premarital couples as well, but the majority of my practice are the couples that are trying to work some issues out. I do the whole continuum. I have some that are separated and some that are actually divorced too. And I also work with singles that are interested in getting into a relationship. So it's the entire gamut. And I love it. You know, it's each phase, each person needs something different. Yeah. You know, but I just think that the most effective is when you're working at the prenup area or the premarital area, and also on the divorce area too, as it relates to what now, what happens next. You know, that's the beyond we're going to talk about a little bit later, because although that chapter closed for you, you now have the opportunity to really reinvent who you are and learn from your mistakes, so you can actually now move forward and get into another relationship and do this type of planning.
And that actually brings me to one thought I always have, and I convey to my clients, is that we're in a constant state of changing.
Yes.
And, you know, even before you get into a relationship, you're still growing, you're still learning about yourself, you're still changing. And luckily, if a couple goes to the premarital counseling stage, they can learn that although they're going to be changing throughout the relationship, they grow closer together versus further apart. And one tool that I have found, though, after the date of marriage that assists a lot of clients is that as people are changing through the marriage, they may come to roadblocks. And normally I see them in financial senses.
Oh, yes.
Where a postnuptial agreement, which is similar to a prenuptial agreement or premarital agreement, but is actually signed after the date of marriage and can address some of the things that bring conflict within the relationship. Because maybe they have not even thought to think about how they're going to deal with retirement accounts, or if a separation does occur, how they're going to deal with the real property or other financial aspects. In a postnuptial agreement, I have actually seen saved marriages.
That makes a lot of sense. So my first book that I wrote, Let the Marriage Begin, talks about getting into a marriage and surviving your first year. And I think it's so poignant because that first year is where you don't have a plan, but the plan is working for you. You know, it's going to work itself. So the roles are going to be defined whether you're doing it intentionally or not. Does that make sense? So oftentimes the couple gets together and they wake up one day like, who is this person I married? Because there was just a lot of things they didn't expect to happen in that first year. I think, you know, when they're in that phase, because now they're out of the honeymoon phase. That's the ideal time to look at postnups, because now they're really understanding that maybe we need to kind of go back to the drawing board and look at the structure a little bit differently.
And define the roles and define what could happen if something were to happen.
Because people aren't even thinking about when they're in love, what happens if I have a sick parent? What happens if my child or a relative needs to come live with me? They're not thinking about long-term plans. There's a lot of what ifs that can actually have a huge impact on your marriage.
And I'll also note that, you know, at the date of marriage, you probably have different expectations.
Yes.
I mean, I'll give one perfect example. I had a client where she owned the property before the date of marriage. Speaking of differences from marriages 50 years ago. She owned the real property, and both spouses earned about the same amount of money. But then as the marriage took off, she was soon earning 6 figures. He wasn't so much. She was concerned that he, you know, was going to quit his job because she was just earning just enough, just so he could coast on by. And that then opens up in the family law world, spousal support claims, property claims, and she was so worried. And she comes to me and she's like, Theresa, I don't want to get divorced. I just don't want to have the threat that he's going to leave me and suddenly I'm going to have to pay everything that I've earned. And I'm like, I got a fix for that. Postnuptial agreement. And lo and behold, you know, after a couple of rounds of negotiations, pretty simple actually, they were able to take the financial burden, the strain that was on that marriage off the table, and they can focus on each other once again.
Absolutely.
And at least it's my understanding, they've never had to enforce that agreement, and they are happily married.
That's wonderful. And I bet in the midst of going through that, a lot of issues were uncovered in why she was feeling that way and what she needed. And so that was a good thing that he was open to hearing that and actually really was able to look at the marriage and, you know, understand that to do this for my wife really improves the relationship. So that's really important.
To support one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is why I like to remind people, I am a family law attorney. I'm not a divorce attorney. People divorce themselves. I just handle the paperwork. But at the end of the day, I think our goals are mutual in the sense that we want to make sure people are in healthy situations. That's our goal. So with that stated, are there any other good practices that you would recommend for individuals in a relationship?
Absolutely. When you have, for me, it's just like if you're going to the doctor on an annual basis just to make sure your health is taken care of, I am a huge advocate for making sure that you're coming to see a therapist. There is nothing wrong. I actually call them check-ins. You know, we do check-ins with couples all the time where you're just coming in to say, hey, you know, things are going great this year or this quarter. And I just wanted to come in and talk about how things are going. But then there are other times where there's been a life change. You think it may be minor, however, it's kind of causing all kind of issues within the relationship, and the therapist can help you catch that so that it doesn't actually progress and actually exacerbate. So it's really important to do regular check-ins and have someone who has a neutral place that can help you guide you through your relationship.
And I'll actually expand on that idea because I have had clients come into my office and tell me that one life-changing event occurred during their relationship, and ever since that day, the person has been completely different. And it could be, you know, they lose a house, or they lose a child, or they have a child, or like you stated earlier, a family member is sick, and now the couple is caring for that family member. And those are all life-changing events that you don't necessarily need to run to ending the relationship,
Right.
but rather you do need to address. And working with a therapist, I would say, is it's very helpful to address that
Absolutely.
issue.
And what happens is you just continue operating. You know, our lives are so busy, so we just operate. We do. We just behave. We just go. But until there's a blowout, you don't realize the impact, you know? And so it's important just to have this casual conversation. Yeah, you know, my grandmother was in a severe car accident, and you come to find out in therapy that this grandmother raised you. So, you know, that has such a tremendous impact on how it's affecting your relationship, and you're not even connecting the two. So it's really important to have check-ins.
And I would like to, I guess, piggyback on that idea. You don't have to come to a family law attorney only when you're going through divorce. Yeah. You can actually consult with a family law attorney at any time just to understand how the law applies to marriage and your relationships, because it can have an effect on how people worry about things. A perfect example is that there is still this misconception in the world that fathers will have less parenting time with children than the mothers automatically. And that's really no longer the case. It is on a specific case-by-case basis, but there's no presumption that a mother, simply because she's a mother, will automatically get primary custody, for example. So that's something to think about. And that's maybe something to think about throughout the relationship, because that also calls for both parties to have equal roles in raising the children, for example.
Right. And it's funny that you say that, because when you're in the midst of the romantic phase of the relationship, you're not thinking about divorce, you're not thinking about the what ifs, but having the knowledge is power. You may not even need it. You could give it to a friend, you know, you may not even need it, but like something as simple as, you can't really get annulments, you know? So you think if you got into a marriage early on and something went awry, I'll just get an annulment. And that's not even a thing.
I mean, there's a law for an annulment, but it's a lot easier to get the divorce.
Right, exactly. So just, you should have to have the education. And so it would be really helpful that even as a part of your premarital work, just knowing, going through the whole continuum, this is what this can look like for you.
And I think it's fair, especially because parties get into relationships for good intentions. They do. And I think it's fair for both parties to know what their legal rights are from the very beginning, what what issues both parties have in the relationship in terms of issues they may need to address. I mean, I can understand coming from a broken home that I probably have issues that I still don't know about. And I'm sure I'll delve into that at that time and date that I decide to get in a relationship.
But in anything else, you plan for the long term, you know? And so just having the information to say, what if? What's the what if plan? Of course you don't want a divorce, but let's really face it, the divorce rate is over 50%. So what does that look like? Plan ahead. And just if you put it away and never have to use it, then that's wonderful.
And I'll be honest, not many people know this, but I used to teach dance. And so I would teach couples their first dance. And I used to tell my friends, I'm like, I know which relationships, how they talk to each other, how they work with one another, how they help each other or not help each other in learning the dance movements. And the more supportive that the parties are in the relationship, I would sometimes, I'd be like, they'll stay married for at least 30 years, or they'll be married for the rest of their life. The same thing applies to when I see people drafting a postnuptial agreement. Even though they're planning for the end, I almost feel in my heart that they are going to last probably longer than most other relationships, if not forever.
Absolutely. And it's so funny you talk about dance, because in my Let the Marriage Begin book, I had a chapter, The Art of the Dance, and we'll actually send my couples to dance lessons. And I do that because, because it teaches you more than dance. It teaches you how to communicate. It teaches one how to lead and how to follow. And it teaches you how to become vulnerable. So there are so many things that the art of the dance can teach you. And I love it that you can also kind of, really, you can understand people's personalities. Because some people aren't open to being taught. Especially if you're this strong, powerful woman and you've been told that you have to lead, you have to know how to submit to your man. Especially if the finances are kind of, off balance, you have to learn how to submit if he's going to be the head of that household. And dance teaches you that.
I'm always a proponent for dance lessons. So I guess that's our beyond. We've got some dance lessons.
That's right.
So I guess just as a final wrap up, I would say that going to a therapist from the get-go to help you identify the healthy ways to be in a relationship is probably key number one. And then key number two would be utilizing the law to your goals and your end game. And if your end game is to be in a healthy, successful marriage, then I would think you would want to know what the law is and utilize that law if it applies to your situation. Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any right this second. We were having some good interaction, but no specific questions. I'm sure that means that people are going to be following up with you after the fact. This is a great topic. Guys did a great job discussing. I guess to end, why don't we talk about what's one thing? You could tell couples one thing, or even individuals. Let's say that. Maybe it's not just couples, right? If there's one thing, one piece of advice, something that you could share with couples that are either looking to get married or long-term, I'm sure there's something out there that's applicable to most everyone. What would it be?
I would say extensive planning. Really spend time planning on the marriage and not the wedding, for me.
So I'm going to go a little bit more lawyer-esque here. Being organized. And what I mean by that is, first off, identifying what your goals are.
Yes.
Okay. And that could be in life, in your career, in making sure you pay your rent on time. And furthermore, keeping organized in terms of your finances. I can't tell you how often enough I get clients through my door, whether they're drafting a premarital agreement, a postnuptial agreement, or going through a divorce, that I ask, so where are your bank accounts? Oh, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know where your bank accounts are? So knowing where your bank accounts are, knowing what type of bank accounts you have, knowing what type of investment accounts you have. Another issue I've seen is that couples don't communicate about those financials.
Right.
So in a healthy relationship, and let me know if I'm wrong, but both parties should be discussing what accounts they have.
And when they're coming to premarital counseling, that is a topic. That's a section we actually cover. I mean, we hit everything: sexual relationships, blended families. People don't plan for these things, and finances are key because everything we do, our behaviors are based on our belief systems. Two people are coming together with two different belief systems as it relates to money. So you have to talk about that. So you also have to really create a common plan as a couple. And when you're not doing that, there's two accounts over here, and I don't want you to see what my money is, or we have this one pot. So you really do have to come together and really be intentional about what that looks like.
And I would say that probably is a good thing to review if the couple has regular meetings themselves.
That's right.
Because I think if everyone knows, even if the accounts are not in joint names, but if everyone knows which accounts exist and which are joint, which are not, which accounts and what the use of those accounts are for, then that open disclosure only helps the relationship and the trust building and growing together versus apart. I would also add that a couple should go ahead and keep those financials on record. Keep copies of your tax returns, keep copies of your bank statements. And I'm not just saying this for the family law matters, I'm just saying in general, because if you want to buy a house together, if that's a goal, or if you want to send a child to college and that's a goal, all those financials and being organized with the financials will help you in all of your financial goals together.
Let me just give you a really quick example. I just had emergency surgery. And didn't know I was having emergency surgery, by the way. And in doing so, I remember being wheeled off into the surgery, and I had to have the person that I was there with, I had to give them all information about my will, all of that, which was very emotional. But the blessing is I had it. You have to plan, because you never know when that day is going to come where you need it. And as I started to give them that information, they started crying, because the thought of what that worst case scenario could be is really, a huge impact on everything. But that happens as couples too. If you don't have a plan, if someone passes away as a couple and you don't know where the money is, and you still needed to provide for your family, that's very, very, disheartening. So it's really important to plan ahead of time when things are going well.
I think I'm seeing a common theme emerging across family law academies, which is planning and organization.
Yes.
And on that note, you can find all of these webinars on Sodoma Law's website, on our YouTube channel, and on our Facebook. So if you could not plan ahead and make it to our live version, you still have access to all of these. Thank you again to Theresa and Gigi for joining us today. It was a great discussion, and we will see you all in July. Have a great day.